The night Vanessa taped a printed sign to my bedroom door that said, "Guest Room," in a cheerful cursive font, I stood in the hallway of my own house and read it twice. Then I did something that would have surprised every single person in my family. I said nothing. I smiled, went downstairs, made a cup of tea, and pulled out a folder I had been quietly maintaining for 2 years. That folder had a name on it. Mine. Every page of it said the same thing the county recorder's office had said since 1989. This house belonged to Robert Johnson and to no one else. I didn't act on that folder yet. That's the part nobody tells you about the quiet moment before the correction. The stillness. The way a man can read an insult taped to his own bedroom door, fold his hands, and start building a plan instead of an argument. Welcome back to the channel. Grab something to drink, get comfortable, and remember, the people who try to rewrite your house while you're still holding the paperwork usually find out the hard way that paper doesn't care about feelings. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My name is Robert Johnson. I'm 68 years old. I built a life in a 4-bedroom colonial on Larchmont Drive with my wife Margaret for 35 years. We raised 2 children in that house. We buried a dog in the backyard under the maple tree. We hosted 40 Thanksgivings in that dining room. Margaret passed 3 years ago in March on a Tuesday. The kind of ordinary weekday that makes grief feel almost insulting in its plainness. She'd had a heart condition for years. We knew it was coming. Knowing didn't make the house any less quiet afterward. I want you to understand the house before I tell you what happened in it, because the house is the whole story. It wasn't just square footage. It was 35 years of Margaret's hand-picked wallpaper in the downstairs bathroom that she refused to update because it made her laugh every time she walked in. It was a primary bedroom with a window seat she'd read in every Sunday morning with coffee going cold beside her. It was mine, deeded, and mortgage-free, paid off 11 years before she died. I want that fact sitting in your mind clearly, because in a few minutes somebody is going to try to convince you, and me, that it wasn't. 6 months after Margaret's funeral, my son Ethan called me. Ethan is 34, married to a woman named Vanessa, 32, and they had a daughter, Mia, who was 5 at the time, with a second child, Toby, born about a year later. Ethan had lost his job in a corporate restructuring that spring. Vanessa was working part-time from home doing marketing consulting, income that came and went like weather. They were renting an apartment 2 towns over, and the lease was ending. "Dad," Ethan said on the phone, "would it be okay if we stayed with you for a few months? Just to get back on our feet. We'd help around the house. It would be good for you too, not being alone in there." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I was lonely in a way I hadn't told anyone about, not even Claire, my daughter, who called twice a week and worried about me in the careful, managed way adult children worry about a parent they've decided is now fragile. The idea of small feet running through that quiet house again felt like oxygen. A few months, Ethan had said. I didn't know it yet, but a few months was going to become 2.5 years, and somewhere in that stretch of time, the house was going to stop being mine in every way except the one that mattered most. They moved in that October. The first few months were good, genuinely good. Mia's laughter in the backyard. Toby's crib set up in what had been my home office. Vanessa cooked dinner most nights, and I paid for the groceries, and nobody questioned the arrangement because it made sense. I want to be fair here because fairness matters to me even now. Vanessa is smart, organized, and capable. She is also, I came to learn, a woman who cannot occupy a space without eventually deciding she owns it. It started small, the way these things always do. She reorganized the kitchen cabinets without asking, which I let go because who cares where the mixing bowls live? She switched our mail forwarding preferences with the post office, so packages defaulted to her name, which I noticed but didn't mention because it seemed petty to bring up. She began referring to the house, in conversation with her own parents on speakerphone, as our place, not Robert's house. Our place. I heard it the first time while I was fixing the gutter and nearly fell off the ladder, not from surprise exactly, more from the strange vertigo of hearing your own life quietly renamed in front of you. Then came the dinners. For the first year I sat at the head of the table, the seat I'd sat in for 3 decades. Sometime in year 2, without any conversation, without any moment I could point to, Vanessa began seating her parents there when they visited on Sundays, and I found myself at the side of my own dining room table, passing the salt to a man I'd met 4 times. I said something once, lightly, joking. "Guess I've been demoted," I said, smiling, sliding into the side chair. Vanessa laughed and said, "Oh, Robert, don't be dramatic. It's just easier for serving." I let it go. I let a great many things go that year, and I want you to sit with that, because letting things go is not the same as things being fine. It's just quieter. The photographs were the first thing that actually hurt. Margaret's photographs lined the staircase wall, 30-some frames spanning our wedding in 1985 up through Mia's christening. The last photo Margaret was well enough to attend. I came home from a doctor's appointment one Thursday afternoon to find half of them gone, replaced with framed pictures of Vanessa's side of the family, her parents' 40th anniversary, her sister's wedding, a professional portrait of Ethan, Vanessa, and the kids that must have cost $400 at some studio downtown. The remaining Margaret photographs had been consolidated onto one small shelf near the coat closet, tucked behind an umbrella stand. I found Vanessa in the kitchen. "Where are the rest of the photos?" I asked, and I kept my voice level because that has always been my way, level, even when something inside me was not level at all. "Oh," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I was doing a little decluttering. The staircase felt cluttered with so many frames of the same few years, you know? I thought it'd be nice to freshen it up." I stood there. "Those are photos of my wife," I said. "Of course," she said, and I kept some up. "I just thought it'd be nice to have some balance, some newer memories too, since we live here now." Since we live here now? I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was the first real crack in the foundation, and I should have addressed it directly, instead of walking upstairs and putting the missing photographs back on the shelf myself, quietly, the way you'd tend to a wound you didn't want anyone to see you had. The next 18 months brought a slow accumulation of small territorial claims. Vanessa began making decisions about landscaping, hiring a lawn service without asking me, and when the first invoice arrived in my mailbox for $1,100, she said, "Oh, I just figured you'd want the yard looking nice for the kids," and I paid it, because arguing over a lawn service felt smaller than I wanted to be. She started hosting her book club in the living room every 3rd Thursday, rearranging the furniture for it, and rarely putting it fully back. She told me as teacher, during a parent conference I only heard about secondhand, that they lived at their house on Larchmont. No mention of me at all, as though I were a helpful uncle renting a room rather than the man whose name was on every document the county held. I became somewhere in that 2nd year the unpaid handyman and occasional babysitter of a household I owned outright. I fixed the garbage disposal. I drove Mia to soccer practice on Tuesdays because Vanessa had a client call. I mowed what the lawn service missed along the fence line. I did all of it gladly because I loved those children and because I still believed foolishly that helping was the same as belonging. Ethan, for his part, worked long hours at a new job he'd finally landed, and mostly stayed out of the daily friction, the way men sometimes do when the friction doesn't seem to be about them. I don't think he saw what was happening, or he saw it, and decided peace was easier than noticing. The guest room sign was not, in hindsight, a single event. It was a conclusion. Vanessa had been building toward it for 2.5 years. One photograph, one seating chart, one offhand, our place at a time, and I had let every single piece slide because I was lonely, and because the noise of a full house felt better than the silence Margaret left behind. I want you to understand that about me before I tell you what happened on the Thursday in question, because I don't want you to think I was blindsided. I was complicit in my own erasure for 2.5 years. I just didn't know there would be a specific afternoon when erasure became official. I'd gone to visit my brother in Columbus for 4 days, a trip I'd planned for weeks. When I came home Thursday evening, my suitcase still in hand, I found Toby's toy bins stacked in what used to be my study, Mia's art supplies spread across what used to be Margaret's reading nook, and my clothes, all of them, folded into boxes, stacked in what used to be the guest room down the hall, the smaller room with the window that faced the street instead of the backyard. My bedroom door, The primary bedroom, the one Margaret and I had shared for 3 decades, had a fresh coat of paint on the trim and a small laminated sign taped at eye level. "Guest room," it read, in a cheerful cursive font, the kind you'd print off a template for a bed and breakfast. I stood in that hallway with my suitcase still in my hand for what felt like a very long time. Then I found Vanessa in the kitchen, Toby on her hip, and I asked, as calmly as I have ever asked anything in my life, what exactly is happening to my bedroom? She didn't even flinch. "We talked about it actually," she said. "Ethan and I decided the primary suite makes more sense as a guest space going forward, since my parents visit so often and the window seat is perfect for my mom's back. You'll be so much more comfortable in the smaller room anyway, less to keep clean." I looked at her for a long moment. "Ethan wasn't home yet. We talked about it," she'd said. "Not with me. About me. In my own house." I said, "I see." And I carried my suitcase to the smaller room and unpacked exactly nothing that night. I sat on the edge of that unfamiliar bed, and I thought about Margaret's window seat now reserved for a woman I'd met a handful of times, and something in me went very, very quiet. Not angry. Not yet. Quiet the way a lake goes quiet right before weather changes. The following Saturday was Ethan's birthday, and Vanessa had invited both sets of grandparents, her parents, and, awkwardly, me, along with Claire and her husband, and a handful of neighbors. 14 people, seated around the dining table and spilling into the living room. I was at the side of the table again, where I'd been for a year now, and dinner was moving along pleasantly enough until Vanessa tapped her glass and stood up to make an announcement. "Everyone," she said, beaming, "we have some exciting news. We're finally redoing the primary suite. New paint, new furniture, the whole thing since my parents stay over so often, and Robert's just so much more comfortable in the guest room anyway." Then Vanessa added, still smiling, still warm, "And honestly, Robert, we've been talking, and we really think you'd be so much happier somewhere with more support these days. Some of those senior communities nearby are lovely, less house to manage, more people your own age. It might be worth looking into." 14 people at that table went quiet, for exactly as long as it takes a person to realize they've just watched something happen that they can't quite name yet. I set my fork down. I looked at Vanessa, then at Ethan, who was still looking at the television, then at Claire, whose face had gone pale in the specific way of someone doing math she didn't want to do. "That sounds like a wonderful plan," I said, and I meant every word of it, though not in the way anyone at that table understood in the moment. I finished my dinner. I complimented the roast, I helped clear plates, I did not raise my voice, and I did not correct a single thing Vanessa said in front of 14 people, because I had already decided, somewhere between the guest room sign and that dining table, exactly what I was going to do, and it wasn't going to happen with an audience. What none of them knew, what I had never once mentioned in 2.5 years of folding myself smaller in my own home, was that the deed to that house had never left my name. Not for one single day. When Ethan asked to move in, and later when he'd started saying, "Our place," and Vanessa had started saying, "When it's ours," about certain renovation dreams she had, I'd noticed. I'd noticed the way you notice a draft before you find the broken window. I hadn't planned to evict my own son. I want to be honest about that. But somewhere around month 8, after the first "our place" comment, I'd quietly met with my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Alvarez who had handled Margaret's estate, and updated my living trust to make absolutely certain the house would remain solely mine, protected, undisputed, for as long as I wanted it to be. I told no one. I kept the paperwork in a folder in my home office, before that office became a toy room, and then in a lockbox I moved to my new smaller bedroom without comment. Sunday morning, the day after the birthday dinner, I called Patricia. "Robert," she said, "it's Sunday." "I know," I said. "I need to talk about the house." A pause, then the sound of her getting a notepad. "Tell me everything." I told her everything. The photographs, the seating chart, the sign on my own bedroom door, the announcement at dinner, the senior community suggestion delivered like a party favor in front of 14 guests. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Robert, They are occupants in your home with no lease and no ownership, stake whatsoever. You are entirely within your rights to formally request they vacate. Given the situation, I'd recommend we do this properly, in writing, with appropriate notice so there's no ambiguity for anyone. How does 60 days sound? 60 days sounds right, I said. The notice went out that Wednesday, delivered by a process server to avoid any confusion later about whether it had been received. A formal attorney-drafted letter stating that as the sole legal owner of the property at 214 Larchmont Drive, I was providing 60 days written notice that all non-owner occupants were required to vacate the premises. Ethan called me 40 minutes after it arrived. "Dad, what is this?" I answered because I owed him that much, at least the first call. "It's exactly what it says it is," I told him. "You have 60 days. Dad, this is insane. This is our home." "It's my home, Ethan," I said, and I kept my voice level. The same level voice I'd used for 2.5 years while things were quietly taken from me, one photograph, one seating chart, one bedroom at a time. It has been my home since 1989. I let you and Vanessa live in it because I loved having you close, and I was lonely after your mother died. That was never the same thing as you owning it. You know that. Dad, we can talk about this. We can fix this." "I already tried fixing it," I said, "for 2.5 years. I fixed it by staying quiet every single time something of mine was quietly taken. I'm done fixing it that way." Vanessa called next, and I let that one go to voicemail, and then a text arrived, and then several more over the following days, ranging from confused to furious to, eventually, something that resembled an apology wrapped so tightly in justification that it barely qualified. Claire called too, and I answered hers, because Claire had looked at me across that dinner table with actual alarm on her face, and I owed her the truth. "Dad," she said, "is this really happening? Are you seriously making them move out?" "I am," I said. Claire was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said finally. Quieter. "I should have said something at dinner. I'm sorry I didn't. You're not responsible for what Vanessa said," I told her. "No," Claire said, "but I sat there and watched it happen, and I said nothing. And that's its own kind of participation. I've been thinking about that all week." Vanessa showed up at the house 12 days after the notice, while Ethan was at work, and found me in the kitchen making coffee. The same kitchen where she'd once told me, so easily, that we live here now. "Robert," she said, "we need to talk about this like adults." I poured myself a cup and didn't offer her one. "I'm listening," I said. "This is our home, Robert. The kids have their rooms, their school, their friends down the street. You can't just uproot an entire family over some hurt feelings about a sign on a door." "It wasn't a sign on a door, Vanessa," I said. "It was 2.5 years of you deciding one small piece at a time that this house belonged to you instead of me. The photographs. The seating chart. Telling me as teacher you lived at your house on Larchmont, announcing at your husband's birthday dinner in front of 14 people that I should look into senior communities in my own home over dinner I paid for. That wasn't hurt feelings. That was a pattern, and you built it very deliberately, whether you'd admit that to yourself or not." She was quiet for a moment, and something flickered across her face, something almost close to recognition, before it hardened back into defense. "You're punishing us for you being lonely," she said. "No," I said. "I was lonely for 2.5 years, and I let that loneliness convince me that being erased slowly was better than being alone. I'm not lonely enough anymore to accept that trade. I want my house back, Vanessa. Not shared with you, not managed by you, mine, the way it's been on paper since before you and Ethan even met." Ethan came to me alone 3 days before the 60 days ran out, sat across from me at the kitchen table, in the seat that used to be his mother's. Vanessa showed up at the house 12 days after the notice, while Ethan was at work, and found me in the kitchen making coffee, the same kitchen where she'd once told me, so easily, that we live here now. "Robert," she said, "we need to talk about this like adults." I poured myself a cup and didn't offer her one. "I'm listening," I said. "This is our home, Robert. The kids have their rooms, their school, their friends down the street. You can't just uproot an entire family over some hurt feelings about a sign on a door. It wasn't a sign on a door, Vanessa, I said. It was 2.5 years of you deciding one small piece at a time that this house belonged to you instead of me. The photographs, the seating chart, telling me as teacher you lived at your house on Larchmont, announcing at your husband's birthday dinner in front of 14 people that I should look into senior communities, in my own home, over dinner I paid for. That wasn't hurt feelings. That was a pattern, and you built it very deliberately, whether you'd admit that to yourself or not. She was quiet for a moment, and something flickered across her face, something almost close to recognition, before it hardened back into defense. You're punishing us for you being lonely, she said. No, I said. I was lonely for 2.5 years, and I let that loneliness convince me that being erased slowly was better than being alone. I'm not lonely enough anymore to accept that trade. I want my house back, Vanessa. Not shared with you, not managed by you, mine the way it's been on paper since before you and Ethan even met. Ethan came to me alone 3 days before the 60 days ran out, sat across from me at the kitchen table, in the seat that used to be his mother's, and said, Dad, I know I should have said something at that dinner. I know I should have said something a long time before that dinner, honestly. I saw things happening, and I told myself it wasn't my business to referee between you two, and I think I just didn't want to deal with it. So I didn't. I let you get pushed into a smaller room in your own house because dealing with it felt harder than ignoring it. I know that's not an excuse. It isn't, I agreed, but I believe you're telling me the truth. He nodded, eyes wet, hopeful. And it doesn't change anything, I added, and watched the hope drain out of his face the way I imagined mine had drained a dozen times over the past 2 years. I'm not angry at you the way I was angry at Vanessa in that moment at the table, Ethan, but I spent 2.5 years slowly disappearing in my own home while you looked at the television. I need you to actually hear that, not just apologize for it. They moved out on day 58, into a rental 2 towns over, the same kind of apartment they'd left when they first asked to stay with me. I didn't gloat. I didn't stand in the driveway watching the moving truck the way some version of me might have wanted to. I went for a walk instead around the block, Margaret. And I used to walk every evening for 35 years. And when I came back, the house was quiet, in the way it used to be quiet before Ethan's phone call 6 months after the funeral, and I found, to my surprise, that the quiet didn't frighten me the way it once had. I moved my clothes back into the primary bedroom that same week. I hung Margaret's photographs back on the staircase wall, all 30-some of them, in the exact order they'd always been in because I remembered it. I sat in her window seat with coffee on a Sunday morning for the first time in nearly 3 years, and I felt, for a few minutes, like the house had exhaled along with me. Here's what I think about now. On the good mornings, coffee in hand, sitting in that window seat that took 2.5 years and a 60-day legal notice to get back. Respect is not something you can rename with a laminated sign and a cheerful font. Ownership is not something that transfers because someone says, our place, often enough in front of company. I gave that family 2.5 years of my patience, my quiet, my willingness to shrink myself smaller and smaller, to keep a full house instead of an empty one. They gave me a guest room sign on my own bedroom door and a suggestion, delivered over dinner in front of 14 people, that I go find somewhere else to be less trouble. I took the third option. I kept the house, and I made the correction on paper, because paper, it turns out, doesn't care how sincerely someone insists something is theirs. Margaret, if you're listening, and I've decided to believe you are, I want you to know I put your photographs back exactly where they belong. I sit in your window seat most Sunday mornings now, coffee going cold beside me the way yours always did, and it is, without question, the most peace I have felt in 3 years. This house was always ours, yours and mine, 35 years of it, and no laminated sign was ever going to change what the county recorder's office has said since 1989. Robert Johnson still lives at 214 Larchmont Drive. He sleeps in his own bedroom. He keeps his late wife's photographs exactly where they've always been, and he does not need anyone's permission to be at home in his own house. If you like this story, Hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, family-centered stories.